those initial interactions with good leaders, both above you and below you, shape your whole trajectory of your career. So that's why I think, as a leader, it's so important to be that way all the time, because you never know what interaction is going to be the one that people remember.
Welcome back. I'm T.D. Smyers, and this is No Clichés. Hello and welcome to No Clichés, companion podcast to my coaching, consulting, and leadership writing at A Bold Leader. I'm T.D. Smyers, and I've been in leadership my whole life, from taking point in small teams to command of military troops to multiple roles as a CEO. And if this life in leadership has taught me anything, it's that leading is more art than science. I call this No Clichés because we'll go well beyond the basics here, leaving behind the LinkedIn infographics to dive headfirst into some of the toughest situations a leader can face. Through stories and interviews, you'll get a behind-the-scenes look at leadership truths that always apply, no matter what industry or sector you're in. This is a no-holds-barred leadership conversation, so strap in. Some leaders make their mark in the system by following its rules, and others change the system for the good of everyone who comes after them. My US Naval Academy classmate, Dr. John Cordle, is one of these rare latter leaders. Long before the Navy was ready to talk about the impact of fatigue and poor sleep on readiness and safety, John was the deployed commanding officer willing to put his reputation on the line to get the truth heard. His work, captured in Going Circadian, has literally changed how the Navy operates and saved lives in the process. Now he's turning that same honesty inward with his upcoming book, Letters to Myself, a collection of life lessons written with humility, courage, and the hard-earned wisdom of a leader who walked the talk. Today on No Clichés, we sit down with Captain John Cordle to explore a legacy still shaping the fleet and the leaders in it. Let's go to the studio now with John. Dr. John Cordle, classmate of mine, 1984. It's good to have you on this morning, man. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's great to be here, TD. Thank you for making the time.
For you, it was easy. It's been a long time, and in the book that we're going to talk about, it was pretty neat for me to read back on that as a kid who went to the Naval Academy from rural Texas, reading about a kid who went to the Naval Academy from rural Georgia. We had a lot of similarities, including our main reason for accepting that nomination, just to get out of town.
Yep.
Yeah, but obviously you've come a long way. We're going to have a chance to talk about a lot of that stuff. And another thing that kind of brought me back and makes this so timely is, of course, it's the 250th birthday of the US Navy that we spent so much time in. And I'm on social media and I'm taking a look at all of the mids at the Naval Academy who are going through service selection right now. Mm-hmm. You remember that time?
Yeah, very much.
It wasn't quite as much fun as it seems to be now, with everybody getting jerseys that say Navy pilot and Marine Corps and whatever.
Yeah, no, a little bit different process right now. Ours was kind of walk in, grab a piece of paper, and go back to your room and either be happy or sad, Yeah,
I saw some great advice. Somebody on X yesterday said, if you don't get what you want in service selection, you go back, you can mope for about 30 minutes, and then from that point on it to infinity, you own it.
Yep, make the best of it.
Needs of the Navy. But obviously you've got no complaints about your career. You had a great one and you write about it a lot. We'll talk about the book. I'm going to give you a chance to kind of describe why you chose this format for a book. It reminds me of the old Brad Paisley song, Letter to Me, where he writes back to himself as a kid. But the fact that you did that gave me a chance to think back on my own career, which is kind of a cool way that your book, everybody can participate it in their own way, right? They read your letters of advice and counsel and admonition back to your earlier self in different stages. And I mean, I found myself doing it. I was thinking about me and things I could have and should have and would have.
That's awesome.
Back in their days. Yeah, I think everybody's going to have that. So
it's funny. I never thought about that as I was doing this, but you're the second person to tell me exactly that they had to put the book down halfway through to kind of think about their own life. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. It's a way that your book gets personalized every single time it gets read, which is kind of neat. And the book's not even out yet, man. You have so many wildly awesome testimonials in the front of that book from some pretty significant people. And now we're waiting for this thing to get out. So we'll talk about that at the end. But how'd you collect all those great testimonials?
Well, those are all people that I've served with or worked with over my career, and I just sent them a PDF of the book, and generally they're people who had written a book of their own that I enjoyed.
Yeah.
Kirk Lippold, my old captain, Admiral Servidus, and then I just happened to, Carlos Del Toro was he was class of '85, I believe, but we've kept each other. He had command of Bulkley when I was in Oscar Austin, so we've kept up with each other for over the years, and poor Bill Hamlet from US Naval Institute has edited hundreds of my articles and given me massive, feedback. So it was great to get something from him. It was all just friends that agreed to take a few minutes and jot something down. So I was pretty humbled by some of those.
Well, I think it's a testament to the career you led and the life you lead. And one really solid testament is what Keith Green wrote about you in the foreword. And one of the things I thought was really cool.
Yeah, no, Keith, he wrote that, a lot of stuff I sort of ghost wrote, but Keith was like, nope, I don't need that kind of help. He wrote a book called Black Officer, White Navy.
Yeah.
Keith was the guy who kind of encouraged me to write a book. He kept really about 2 years, he was cajoling me every time we talked. This goes in the book, right? This goes in the book, right? I was lucky I met a friend, a Navy chaplain, through classes I was teaching. And he introduced me to Tim Demme, who's a retired Navy chaplain who has the Stone Tower book publishing company. And I sent him the PDF, and he came back the next day and said, read it last night, I'm in. And so, that you never know who's going to be the right connection to lead you towards the path of success.
Sure. And I hear that consistently in these interviews with authors, that they had somebody, a mentor, a friend, or several, who kind of cajoled them, as you put it, and moved them forward to going to print and publishing the stuff that was in their head or in their letters or in their memoirs for such a long time. But Keith captures your professional life, the way you conducted yourself professionally, pretty succinctly right off the bat in the first paragraph. He says, you ask yourself or you guide yourself by the question, is this right? If it is, how can I make it better? And if it's not, how can I make it right? I'm coaching now. This podcast is kind of, an outward-facing element of my coaching practice. And when I coach for authenticity and boldness. And these things, as I read your book and as I read, particularly starting with Keith's forward, I think they reflect what you've done in your life, how you've always tried to make things better. You've tried to find things that were broken, that needed fixing, or that just weren't right. And you fixed them. So kudos to you there, classmate. Who would have known that when we were two knuckleheads just worrying about if we were going to pass and then graduate at the Naval Academy?
Man, it's funny. I don't know if you remember a classmate, Robin Russell, who passed away recently. He was on California with me, Ed Elkin, Robin, and I think there was one other classmate. And we went to our 30th reunion and ended up sitting at the table with them and their wives. And at the time on California, I was the only single JO in the wardroom. And two of the wives, as I said hi for the first time in 30 years, were like, John, you're the last person we thought would have made a career out of the Navy. And I'm like, really? Wow.
Let me digest how I take
That's
that.
the way they remember me, because I was like the bachelor sleeping on their couch when I.
Yeah.
But those were pretty amazing, and I think we all had all three of us on California did fine, had great careers. Robin had a fantastic career, passed away way too soon.
Yeah.
But and then with the book, the inspiration for that format was a letter from my grandfather, which is in the book as well. He wrote me something when I was headed to the Naval Academy, and basically said, be proud of your excellent record and keep striving. And he's the one that drove me into the Glee Club. I went to the academy. I was going to be an English major because they wrote me this nice letter that they said, we think you write well. We'd like to get you over to the English department. And I was pretty flattered. So I was like, sure, I'll do that. I had no idea what I wanted to do at the Naval Academy. Then I found out they wrote that letter to everybody. You probably got one. And I went home for Christmas, and my granddad was like, what are you doing, knucklehead? That's an engineering school. So I may be the only guy who shifted majors from a bull major to an engineering major. And the other thing that he gave, which was really life-changing, was join the Glee Club. He said he'd heard the Naval Academy Glee Club at one point. And I wasn't an athlete. I had no idea about sports, and I wasn't any good at them, but I could sing. And so I did that with Dr. Talley, and that got me out of Bancroft Hall during plebe summer to, all kind of trips and stuff like that. So I owe a lot to my granddad. So it was the inspiration for the format. And then at some point, it sort of clicked that, hey, what if I just use that format at each one of my jobs, my assignments, shipboard assignments, and wrote a letter to myself at that stage of my career about the stuff that I had learned during that assignment. And it kind of fell into place and made it easy to kind of do it in small chunks and put something together. Found some old pictures that kind of fit the corresponding chapter. And then another proofreader friend of mine read it and said, "This is great if you want to sell it to like Naval Academy ensigns, right?"
Yeah.
Because you need to expand it, get rid of some of the military stuff, and then put something in there that gives a historical perspective, and then give something that gives a business perspective.
Yeah.
So we added some portions to that.
I like the way you did that at the end of each chapter. And one of my questions for you was going to be, how many iterations of this did it take you to get out all of the acronyms and Navy so that it would be widely readable?
And they're still in there, some of them.
Some of them, sure.
It helped a lot to have this young lady read it who wasn't military, had no background, because she was like, "What's an XO? What's this? What's that?" And it's probably still too heavy with that stuff, but it's tough to shake that salt water off after 30 years.
Yes, man. I don't know if it's too heavy with it, though. I mean, sure, there is some of it, but it is what you did. It was the profession, and I think you do a great job of translating.
The whole thing was fun. It was kind of cathartic to think back, and Keith kept sending me stuff that this, by the time he would have been a 500-page book if I put everything in there. But at some point, people can only focus for about 100 pages, I think. So I think that works out fine. But no, yeah. I'm excited about it. It's kind of unbelievable, the journey, but it's pretty exciting.
Well, it's come out into something that's very digestible. What I took out of it when I read each chapter, I obviously read it as a former military officer who has been now in a new career for a long time, right? Created a new career as a nonprofit executive. As a matter of fact, I thought about you toward the end of the book where you write your letter to yourself as a veteran and you kind of break down this comparison between going GS and going contractor. And that third option that you talked about in the opening letter to that, where you say, or you could go do something completely different, right?
Right.
And I did that third one, so I should write you an addendum for that. So you
That's
can do
great.
that. Well, you went a route that allowed you to take advantage of what you had done, right?
Exactly.
And to bring your career
to. I've spent 30 years. If I can sell back my knowledge to the Navy, and help, what I really wanted to do was, one, my wife said, "We're staying in Chesapeake. I'm staying in Chesapeake. You can go wherever you want. Just send the check to, Preservation Reach." And I wanted to teach, and I wanted to be close to the waterfront. And I fell into a job that did that. And then in 2017, my passion had always been this thing about sleep. It kind of made my Naval Academy classmates, 14th Company folks are always laughing. The guy who had rack burns on his face is now like the sleep guy for the Navy.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
But, I found a way to get at that using the postgraduate school connections, Dr. Shattuck and the Navy Health Research Center Laboratory, Dr. Rachel Markwald. And we set about changing the Navy's policy, and we did it,
Yeah.
Well, more fundamentally, we laid the groundwork so that when the collisions occurred and there was an appetite now to look at fatigue, that, that the Navy was ready to make that change, and we just kind of built the foundation. If I had a dime for every time I was told, "John, it's a good idea, but it's just we need more research and we need more proof that and then suddenly 17 sailors die, and it's the most interesting thing in the Navy. And so to have been part of that, and like I said in the book, I go on ships, what's going on ships now, and some ensign would be like, "Hey, aren't you that sleep guy?"
Yeah.
And even at our 40th anniversary, I was sitting around a fire at John Fluhart's house, and a mid that he sponsors, the head sponsor, was now a lieutenant on a ship, on a destroyer. And he kept, as I was talking, he kept looking at me, like kind of shaking his finger. And he's like, "Wait a minute, you're that circadian watch guy, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, I just want to say thank you because my ship did that and it was awesome." So that's the thing I'm probably most proud of my time at the Navy.
Well, and probably the thing you're most known for, for those who weren't privileged to go to school with you, you can sit back at the end of your life, when you are fully retired and you're doing whatever the heck you want to do all the time, every day, flying to Germany next week, right? But you can sit back and say, "You know what? I changed the U.S. Navy." And I know you're going to say, "Oh yeah, it was a lot of people." And I get that. But, without a dogged leader bucking the advice of others, shaking off the shackles of history and things that hold us back, that inertia. Without a point man shaking that off, stuff just doesn't happen like this. You know how it is.
No, that's true. And in one of the chapters in the book, I talk about the 3 Ps: passion, patience, and perseverance. And as Keith said in the foreword, he goes, he's found in life that you can change a little bit by pissing people off a little bit, but you can piss them off a lot. And then once you have their attention, you can channel that heat and light onto solving what you want to get done. And so I have followed that advice a few times. One of my friends at work told me the other day, I was working on some kind of project with a wellness thing, and I said something at the meeting that got a lot of people a little bit upset, and he's like, "I'm on to you." I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Your modus operandi is you blow things up, and then you try to control where the pieces land." And I said, "Is it that obvious?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's pretty obvious."
Well, I'm talking to a guy who has disruptive thinker as his LinkedIn description.
Yeah, that was funny. That was a captain friend of mine. That's a good story. The captain, Wellman, he's also a disruptive thinker. But I posted something about renaming the operational fleet readiness plan, and changing the way we deploy ships and all this stuff. And he posted the article on LinkedIn and said, John's a prolific disruptive thinker, which he just made up. And I noticed on LinkedIn, there's all these acronyms after people's names, like MSST and OE and all this stuff. Nobody knows what that stuff is. I don't. So I just made up the PDT and put it on there in the back of my name, and then put that on there, prolific disruptive thinker. And it's funny because, so fast forward like 6 or 8 months, I get an email from the chief of staff at Fleet Forces, Admiral Cordle's staff at the time. And he goes, yeah, and I had met Admiral Cordle through work a couple of times when he was at Fleet Forces, when I was in the Navy. And he goes, yeah, the Admiral's looking for a speaker for a flag conference on leadership. And he specifically said, I want someone disruptive. And I looked on your website and it says you're a disruptive thinker. So I don't know what that is, but can we talk? And the next thing you know, I'm presenting to, basically the entire flag mess at a leadership conference on the topic was disruptive thinking. So,
you created a niche for yourself.
That's right. Somebody the other day on LinkedIn, pretty much my free time, he says, you're a disruptive thinker, but not a critical one about something I said. And I'm like, well, I think I am, but everybody's got their opinion,
Well, especially if they disagree with you, they're going to think that. And I found when I was reading your book that the things that I find valuable, the things that I value, I saw those in your book. Other people will see things that they value in your book. But I think you did a great job with handling some really basic fundamental principles of things. And you say that in the book when you talk about following your dad's advice, right? Know your job and then do your job.
Right.
And those are simple concepts, but in execution, they can be quite difficult when you're met with challenges and distractions and other concerns of the day, right?
And, I don't want to imply that I actually followed that advice. I probably, if I had all the energy back that I spent trying to get out of doing my job, and if I'd applied, 20% of that to doing my job. I was just telling my wife yesterday, she was talking about kids and, how kids break free of their parents and, how their parents help them out and stuff. And I told her, when I was at the Naval Academy, our second class summer, remember we did you went to back then you went to Pensacola, went to Little Creek, went up to Broughton. So my money made it through about half of that. And I ran out of money in Little Creek because I've been drinking and partying and, doing all that stupid stuff. And so I called my dad and I'm like, hey, Dad, can I borrow a couple $100? And he goes, once. And then he hung up and I'm like, okay. Like the next morning, I get summoned to the front desk of the BOQ in Little Creek. Say, there's a commander here to see you. And it wasn't one of my dad's old shipmates who was stationed at Little Creek. And he opens the door. He goes, are you John? I said, yes. He goes, here's $200. He goes, your dad says, don't ask again. And he goes, what are you doing for breakfast? And he took me to breakfast.
I had the same experience. You remember Pete Lingle, Bing and I were on Pro Trimmer together, and we ran out of money. We tried to pull the parent string, it didn't produce, and so we sit there. We threw what we had together, and we had enough to do one of two things. We could either go get a steak dinner that night at the O Club, or we could buy a box of vanilla wafers and a case of Iron City and pretty much last a week.
Okay,
we opted for the latter. But, I don't know what is it about Little Creek. And for us, it was, we still had some time to go, man. And we were out of bucks. Yeah. Living large, man.
That's right. Well, I still remember the other piece of that was somewhere along the way I lost my tie for my service dress blue uniform, and we had to do a muster out for something. And in desperation, I took a black sock and tied it kind of like a tie, put it up in my collar and stuffed it down my shirt, and got away with it. I don't know how, but
Improvise, adapt, overcome.
yeah.
Man, that was nice.
But you
Nice.
know, like I said in the book, I think I'm a testimonial that if I can make captain and have a successful career, pretty much anybody can.
That's a humble comment. And that's one of the characteristics of your book. So if anybody is listening to this and they're thinking, may want to get that book and check it out. It really is unique in that its approach is just the symbol. It's the approach of your book is a testament to honesty and humility. You talk to yourself in these letters, and they're sent back to specific times in your past. A lot of times when you see something like this, a format like this, it's maybe a single letter back to you when you were young to give you advice. You have reached out to yourself in several different stages of your professional development. And in each one of them, I just found that, man, this is a rawly honest approach. And why not? You're talking to yourself, right?
Sure, no, that's a
But
good point.
but at the same time, this is a public book. You're putting this out there, and you've called yourself down for being lazy. You've called yourself down for DUIs and near misses with DUIs and stuff like that. I mean, did you have a hard time, mustering up the courage and humility to put that stuff in there?
No, no. I'm just, I kind of put my heart on my sleeve. And I think one of the things I learned as a leader is if you're a little bit vulnerable, then people relate to that. People don't want, I went to a change of command one time, and the guy that was outgoing got up there and he started the speech by saying, I arrived on USS blankety blank. And the first thing I had to get was a dictionary. And I had to teach the crew the meaning of the word standards and the meaning of the word work and the meaning of the word integrity. And I'm like, really? You just made this whole speech about you.
Yeah.
And I've read a couple of books that are out there in the sort of this genre where they seem to focus entirely on, hey, look at all the good stuff I did. Look how crappy my predecessor was. Look how crappy the guy after me was. And it starts the book with a list of all the honors the ship won and stuff like that. And that's great. I mean, you need to emulate success. And some of those go on to say, I had success in this area because I did these things, which is great. But that's not the book I wanted to write. And so I appreciate the picking up on the. I did have some feedback that it was too focused on the negative, but
I would disagree with that feedback. It's honest and it happened, and you give yourself credit where you succeeded. So it's not too focused on the negative.
Well, it is about me, so let's keep it about me.
Well, you did. You like I said, you give yourself credit, and you've had an incredible career. Your career has impacted how the U.S. Navy does business from here on out. That's the definition of legacy. So you've left a legacy, but you've done that, and you've talked about it in a book with this mixture of honesty. You're honest where you succeeded, and humility. You've had humility where you failed, and you're equally honest about how you present each of those. And what I really took away from the book is this is a great book about achievement, about self-awareness, and about honesty with a complete absence of hubris. Now, you might say that, no, I had hubris in my career. I did. It just doesn't come out in the book.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, my wife, her comment, her most common comment whenever I try to help is, I'm not one of your sailors. You don't have to explain it to me or take it away from me and do it. The other one is, you naval officers, you're pretty full of yourselves. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right, But I think that's part of the profession, right? I mean, everybody, you look at, I just took command of the best ship in the Navy.
Yeah.
And so you want to instill that sort of confidence in your team that they can get it done, even if you have doubts, when you go back into your cabin. But that's what I tried to do. It's kind of interesting timing. In fact, I should introduce you. An old shipmate of mine from the Cole just wrote a book called Grit and Grind. I just posted about it on LinkedIn.
Yeah, check it out.
And I kind of get chills because you think about knowing your sailors, right? And so Nikki Lozano at the time was a PS2, second class petty officer on the Cole. I was the XO. So she was the one that brought in the paperwork every day. And we chatted some, and I kind of knew a little bit about her kid and stuff like that. I had no idea when you read this book about the trauma she endured as a child, being homeless, joining the Navy to get out of her situation with drugs and alcohol
Yeah.
and all this stuff, and then surviving the Cole bombing, and then having some trauma with some family trauma, and then she wrote me a nice thing in the front of it that says, your leadership was part of what helped me get up on step in the Navy, and thanks to your wife too for keeping you grounded, because she knew my wife was on board the ship. I was kind of funny. I had a little Cocker Spaniel at the time, and my wife would come down and visit the ship, and she'd bring the damn dog, and it always caused a fuss at the quarterdeck. And one time, she's like, the quarterdeck's like, man, you can't bring the dog without the XO's permission. She's like, well, my husband's the XO, so I think I have his permission. So that dog came in, and then years later on Oscar Austin, I think I mentioned this in the book. I can't remember if I did or not, but we actually had a dog on deployment. We picked him up in Spain and carried him. We didn't pull back in because the war started, Operation Iraqi Freedom. And so Oscar P. Dog became a mascot, and we carried him around for about 6 months. And my only mistake was I knew the Commodore would not approve of it, so I kind of didn't tell him. But he was he was all in the Med. I was in the Gulf. And then one of my squadron mates, everybody else knew about the dog, though, right? Because they were talking amongst each other. And Oscar was up there every time we went topside. Every time we had an evolution, he'd go topside and do his stuff and everything. And he was adopted by the crew. And one of the chiefs actually took him home when we got back. So JJ puts a briefing up, and he goes, and this is a photograph of USS Oscar Austin during the last underway replenishment. And he's photoshopped this giant St. Bernard onto the forecastle. And everybody starts laughing, and the Commodore's like, why is that funny? And he's like, well, it's because, John's got a dog on board. And he's like, what? And so I get this email from my boss. He's like, John, I'm told you have a dog on board. He goes, I'm deeply disappointed on several levels. One, that you would, flaunt regulations like this, and two, that you would not tell me about it. I want to know your plan. And I said, sir, my plan is to, take it home and find it a home. And he wrote me back, and he's like, I never want to speak of this again. And we never did. I think I read about it in my detaching fitness report, but
that is so traditionally Navy. We will never speak of this again.
That's right. We'll never speak of this again. We never did. But no, one of the chiefs in Virginia Beach, I put the dog on my customs form. I was honest. I wrote one dog, value $25. They stamped the form, and I took the dog off the ship and got him. We actually got his shots in. My XO's cousin was a vet, of all things, in Rota, Spain.
Oh, awesome.
And so the chiefs took the dog over to get his shots and stuff, and they came back with a bill for me, like $250. And they said, yeah, this is the bill, but the guy said if the dog had orders, then it'd be free. So I went into my file. I pulled up a set of message orders for Ensign somebody and changed the name to Oscar P. Dog, printed it out, and gave it back to him, and they took it back to the vet, and it was free.
How did these documents not make the book?
I don't know. There's another book out there. I can send you the link to that one. But I actually wrote a children's book about Oscar P. Dog.
Yeah, I've actually seen your post on that. So, yeah. Now, well, yeah, these would be good things in the appendix of that one, right?
Yeah, maybe I don't know. Keith, as soon as this comes out, Keith's going to say, when's part 2 coming?
Sure. So you think you have some more books in you?
I don't know. I actually think I think what I want to do next is try fiction a little bit. I've spent my life making up stuff. As my wife, again, my wife takes me to task that half of my sea stories are. She's like, I've heard. She read the book the other day, from cover to cover, and I said, did you at least laugh a couple times? She's like, no, I've heard all those stories before.
When we go out with people, I have to ask Barbara. I'm like, look, if I've told them the story already, you got to help.
That's right, kick my shin or something. But I did catch her chuckling a couple of times.
Sure. Well, they're funny. They're good. They're entertaining. And I'm going to home in on one real quick because my coaching practice revolves around 3 aspects of being a chief executive. When I started it, it was character competence and clarity, not character confidence and clarity. And I changed that because I thought, okay, I'm going to approach confidence a little more broadly. Competence actually is a big part of it. And you have that sentence in your book. Competence and its relationship to confidence, that confidence is based on competence. And if you have the latter without the former, it's dangerous, right? That's when you start getting into, some kind of arrogance, right? Instead of confidence. So that resonated with me because of how I went through that decision and what I was going to base my practice on. So you, though, in the book, you get pretty tactical about how to optimize that, right? You say, read the books, read up on the stuff, and talk to the experts.
Right.
Right. And I thought that was good how you brought that home in the business section at the end of that chapter to give people an idea about how you get that way.
No, I think that's a good point, CD. And I think that phrase I think came from when I was in Germany on my exchange tour. I was there with a Navy SEAL, a guy named Colin Kilrain, who actually went on to be a vice admiral. Pretty awesome guy. We always joked that he had so many broken bones. He actually had a parachute accident. They took him to the hospital, and they said, "We think your neck is broken." He's like, "No, my neck was broken last year." That just shows up on the X-ray. But Colin, I think the SEALs kind of came up with that moniker about competence versus competence, right? You got to have one before the other. In the book I tell the story about my first chief. Everybody has their first chief. Mine was Lester McFarland, and he would come running and grab me and take me, "Sir, your blood's being spilled in the log room. You need to get in there now and defend yourself." And I had a pretty abrasive boss, and one time he actually put himself between me and the boss and said, "Hey, this mistake was my fault, sir, and if you want to get to Ensign Cordle, you got to go through me." But he also was the one when I think it was I was giving orders to a sailor to do something, and I had no idea what that entailed. I just kept getting more uppity about, why is it going faster? And he grabbed me essentially by the collar and said, "Sir, have you ever done this before? What you're asking the sailor to do?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, come with me." And we go down.
That was the valve story.
We go down to the bottom of the engine room on this nuclear ship with this valve. And if you haven't been on those types of ships, steam is everywhere. It's about 150 degrees down there. And the guy's under the deck plates turning this giant valve where you have to turn it like 150 times to shut it. And I'm telling him to hurry up, So the senior chief's like, "Why don't you go shut the valve? And then the next time you won't be so quick to judge." And so that lesson stuck with me. He's also the one that, when I was trying to draw systems with a pen, he was like, he took it away. Like,
you did pencil?
"You're not ready for a pen yet." But yeah, I think those initial interactions with good leaders, both above you and below you, shape your whole trajectory of your career. So that's why I think, as a leader, it's so important to be that way all the time, because you never know what interaction is going to be the one that people remember.
Yeah.
If you yell at them, or if you put them down, or you demean them, they'll certainly remember that.
For the wrong reasons, right?
They'll never forget that.
Yeah.
So don't do it.
You've been very honest at times when you haven't been on top of your game. One of your first pieces of advice you give is get yourself a copy of the rules of the road, make notes, learn it like the back of your hand, because at a later time when you should have known that, you didn't know it to the extent that you should have.
Right.
So the book, Letters to Myself, it's coming up. So tell me how people that are listening to this, how can they get a copy? Can they advance order? How does this all work right now?
My goal is to have it out before Christmas.
Great.
The shutdown kind of impacted that a little bit, but
yeah.
I think the goal is I'm planning to do kind of a rollout as soon as I get the pre-orders up, and people can start to order them. And then I have one of my friends, Mark Fava, who was a guest on your show, has mentored me a lot on sort of getting yourself in the door at places like Barnes and Noble and Amazon and stuff like that.
He's good at it.
Yeah, he's a master at it. So I'm just copying him. Yeah. I've read 1,000 leadership books, or I have 1,000. The one that I keep opening back up is Lincoln on Leadership, which is a little 50-page book that I have kept over the years. It's very simple. I don't think this will replace that, but I'm hoping that it will get people's attention and start to pick up some momentum. But I'll try to push it along where I can. But I'll send you all that information as soon as it's available.
We'll push it along too. We'll update it when you get updates on the website. I do that all the time. And hey, we've had a change here and we've made some updates. Sure. So we'll keep everybody posted. It was pretty cool when I looked at your recommended reading list at the back of your book and saw my old XO Mark on there, Mark Fava. His book. It's kind of cool. It's becoming an exclusive little club of people I've been able to interview on the show.
I'll plug his book too. When I saw that, I thought he had been an admiral and was writing about his own stuff. And then I bought the book and I realized that he was writing about what he learned from an admiral. But I've given like 3 copies of that book away to friends of mine who went up. In fact, when I started working on the cover, I sent Mark's cover up and I said, I like the feel of this, right? And then we went through several iterations, and then somebody decided that I think my editors, sort of proofreader, said, we should put a picture of you on the cover. That picture on the cover, by the way, is of me at the apogee of my naval career. That's USS San Jacinto pulling into the last port visit of my career, the Seychelles. So I'm a cruiser CO at the end of a successful deployment, pulling into an awesome Liberty port.
Yeah.
We happened to have a Navy photographer on board who took the picture. And so, it's kind of weird to have, like, professionally, the actual moment, which is the high point of your career in a photograph. So
captured professionally, right?
Yeah, like I
That's
have
pretty
to take
neat.
pictures instead of my selfies. I'll send you, maybe I can get you a copy of the Circadian, the other book that I put together.
Sure.
I've given away probably more than I've sold. But I actually had an XO email me the other day, a prospective executive officer going through the class. And he's like, hey, I picked up your book sitting on the desk here at school, and I just had some free time, so I read it. And I'm like, wow, it's much more than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was pretty cool that, some random person picked up something I wrote and liked it. So
well, I'd love to see it, and we'll include a link on that too. It's you can purchase that one too, can you?
It's on Amazon. Yeah,
okay,
Book the
great.
Dog. I have 3 books on Amazon if you want to take a look. One is the Oscar P. Dog. It's a children's book that has like checklists for deployments and talks about the dog story. And then that's an audio book as well. And then Going Circadian is the story that we talked about, the sleep story, how the Navy changed. So it's more about change and change management than it is about the actual topic of sleep.
Okay.
And then I have another one. You might remember Jeff Bacon. Jeff was a Navy retired captain who was a cartoonist. He wrote the Broadside cartoon that was in the Navy Times when you and I were growing up.
Yeah.
And we did a transition guide. My friend Mike Turner has a PowerPoint that goes through kind of the countdown to retirement. And so we've got that one. I have to update it for this year. But
so that changes a little bit. Okay, good. Well, we'll put links to all of them on
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Put links to Lessons to Myself, obviously, and then all of the other books by Dr. John Cordle we'll have on there so people that like one can jump on there and get the other. So
I love it.
Hey, man, it's been pretty cool talking to you about the book, obviously, but it's been particularly cool catching up with you, with my old classmate.
Yeah, and I mentioned this in the book, but I ought to put a plug in. You know this, TD. So I was thinking about this the other day. I talk about family, but right now on my phone there's a text thread with like 17 people from 14th Company, and I don't think other colleges, institutions provide their graduates with that kind of a network and that kind of a friend, a bond. But here we are, 40-something years later, reconnecting like it was like nothing.
It's true. I really appreciate that about our profession, and in this specific case, I really appreciate getting to reconnect with you. It's my privilege to have you on this show today, man. I appreciate you spending the time with me.
Well, no, the pleasure's been mine, and I really appreciate you doing this and spreading the word. That's awesome.
All right, man.
All right,
go Navy.
Go Navy. Beat Army.
Thanks for listening in to this episode of No Clichés. For visual stuff like links, texts, and pics, visit aboldleader.com and look for the banner at the top of the page. I'd also like to know what you think at aboldleader.com. I'm TD Smyers, and I look forward to having you back.